Good evening. It might say Barkha Dutt live, but because of reasons, Barkha is not hosting the show this evening. This is a special presentation. I'm Kartikeya Batra, and I'm here to navigate the discussion over the next 30 40 minutes on what we are calling the Delhi poll of polls. And why this show today? We've had a long programming session yesterday discussing the exit polls that came out immediately after Delhi's elections ended yesterday. But today, two, three major agencies have released their numbers, and they definitely merit some analysis. So, on the panel today, I'm joined by two eminent guests, and I won't call this a show so much as a discussion. I have with me my friend and colleague Manu Sharma, who's also affiliated with Sea Voter. Thank you for joining us, Manu. And my very good friend, Dr. Nilanjan Sarkar, who's currently at Ahmedabad University Associate Professor. Thank you so much for joining us, Nilan. And over the next 30, 35 minutes, what I'm going to do, Nilan and Manu, is we look at the numbers and try to make sense of them. And let's see what they're telling us. Of course, as we wait for Saturday when final results come in. So before I start, just initial thoughts from you, 30 seconds. When you saw the exit polls yesterday, Manu and Nilanjan, what were the first thoughts that came to your mind? And then, as we bring in today's numbers, how have those priors been updated? So, I'll start with you, Manu.
So, the first thought that came to my mind was it was a trip down the memory lane. So it was 2013 when basically Aam Aadmi Party was spreading its wings, so as to say. And it was a very interesting political experiment back then. So what they were angling for was uh, to take up vast chunks of BJP's middle and upper middle class vote bank and also gnaw at the Congress's marginalized vote bank by promising these direct benefit transfers. So, in a way, they had created a winning formula with basically zero baggage of the history, of corruption, of scandals, anything. And they had essentially a meritocratic system of creating new leaders. So they were not dynastic, there was less of a hint of nepotism about it. So that was their basic formula. And I think for them to lose the current election, something had to go wrong with that formula.
Hmm.
And if the exit polls, bear out, then I think what's happened or what's happening as we speak is that some bits of the middle class, which were up till now staunch Kejriwal supporters, maybe
Yeah,
have broken away.
yeah,
And there is also some dent, I won't say significant, but some dent to the marginalized vote banks or voters, who were convinced of the direct benefit transfers. I think BJP is perhaps
yeah,
stepping up the
yeah,
game there. So it's an interplay of
yeah,
both of these issues. I mean,
yeah.
prima facie.
Prime percent, right? Exactly. So, we have to sort of repeat this health warning. This is if these exit polls are true.
Yes.
Nilan, your quick comments on what you saw yesterday, and then we'll quickly bring up the updated numbers after adding in the polls that came out today.
Yeah, so I largely agree with Manu. So I think what I'm going to do is first maybe give big picture and go smaller, right? I mean, I think after the 2024 national election, there was a question about what it would look like for the BJP to be winning in state elections. Now, one of the things
Right.
that's fascinating about these elections that we've seen, where many of them which BJP has done well, surprisingly well, Maharashtra, Haryana, and now potentially Delhi, is that it's not just about Modi, right? That we see that there is some larger BJP machine. There's a capacity to actually win in places where we thought the BJP had been severely weakened, like Haryana, like Delhi,
Maharashtra.
and yeah, and so and Maharashtra, right? And so I think part of what we have to understand is a what the organizational strength of the BJP is bringing, and B, how they continue to win elections in this context. So,
Yeah.
just very quickly on the Delhi election, I do think we are going to see when we look at the splits in the data that a significant portion of the middle class, by which I mean people who are Delhi middle class is pretty well off by Indian standards, right? So people who are particularly well off, actually, peeling away from the Aam Aadmi Party. And I think one of the reasons why that would have an impact to the extent that it did in Delhi, is that Delhi is actually a much wealthier union territory slash state than much of India. So where we might have believed that a certain kind of DBT welfare politics is kind of the trump card for many political parties, it doesn't work to the same extent in a place like Delhi, where you actually do have to win some proportion of the middle class voters, the well off voters, if you want to keep large victory margins.
So Nilan, and fascinating. Let's come back to that. But the graphic is out there, right? So when you see that, we'll start with the vote shares, and this is what I was obsessing about yesterday. That the logical path is not to start with the seat share and move to the vote share, but the other way around. Analyze the vote share and move to the seat shares, right? So yesterday, when PMAC and Matriz were the only ones to give their vote shares, it looked pretty tight because they were all within the margin of error, right? So plus minus 3 percentage points. Today, we have updated this with Axis My India, which comes in as more of a legacy brand, I would say. Over the last 10, 11 years, it has gotten several elections right. Some wrong as well, of course. And now, largely, the trend seems to be that BJP is ahead of the Aam Aadmi Party. Some polls calling it tighter than others. But one thing is for sure, this is what we were also witnessing when people were on the ground, that Aam Aadmi Party has severely taken a hit. Whether it's going from 54% to 44 or 42, doesn't matter. It's a dip of 8 to 10 or maybe more 12 percentage points. And the BJP is rising, not benefiting by the entire dip of the Aam Aadmi Party, but a large chunk of it. So seems like that the Aam Aadmi Party's loss is BJP's gain and also the Congress's gain to some extent. So if we can now show the seat share splits, I think that again, because the vote shares are kind of in one direction, that will also, yeah. So the one row that we've added in this is Access My India beginning, since yesterday. And again, the direction stays the same, right? So on average, it seems like, except for AAP Matriz, which is calling a hung assembly, I don't see Chanakya Strategies, PMARC, JVC, Access My India. Again, some of these agencies are unknown to me at least. Maybe that's my ignorance, or maybe they're actually very new. They're all calling it in favor of the BJP in terms of seats as well. So, yeah, Manu, first thoughts when you look at the data now. So we've taken like a high-level abstract picture from you, but when you look at the data, it's not a sweep as big as the Aam Aadmi Party secured in 2015 or 2020. This is kind of a Sheila Dikshit type victory of 2008, I would say, right? So, I mean, if these numbers hold true.
You see, this is where I think and I would like to substantiate a bit on Nilanjan's point about Delhi being a wealthy territory. Uh, See, currently speaking, Delhi's per capita at Union Territory level is estimated to somewhere north of $5,000 per capita. Now, that's a very interesting zone. If I were to put my economist hat on, it's almost a Goldilocks zone. So what happens here is that you see a lot of preference changes. So there in terms of consumer preferences, in terms of what kind of uh, what kind of political things that or movements that people associate with, and how they basically project themselves in terms of aspirations. And now this is where I think things are becoming interesting, that with rising per capita income, obviously there will be inequality. So there will be folks who would actually staunchly go on the other side, and there would be the aspirational class which would say, hey, you know what, our thinking is different, we want to go the other way. So perhaps in a way Delhi's politics is normalizing, you know although as they say, the more things change, the more they remain the same. So for about 2 to 3 terms we saw this movement in Delhi's, or churn in Delhi's politics, whereby you had people voting one way in Lok Sabha and the other way in Vidhan Sabha, and there were no half measures, because they thought that was basically the thing to do. But now I guess what's happening is that the normalization is taking place, and you have people breaking away from the one-way trend and voting in for their respective interest groups, or let us say um, beyond what could be called a state level consensus. And that is very interesting. because that used to exist during Sheila Dikshit. And if we go back to Sushma Swaraj, Saab Singh Verma, Madan Lal Khurana's era, and I'm really talking way back. But that was the case, and it's sort of reverting back to the mean.
Nilan, I'll come to you with the added burden of analyzing one more data point, which is that today's Chanakya has just given their numbers. We'll update the slide. As per them, with a margin of error of 3 percentage points, BJP 49, Aam Aadmi Party 41, BJP seats, this is for the vote shares. For seat shares, BJP is 51 plus minus 6, and Aam Aadmi Party is 19 plus minus 6. It's a rout. And another exit poll, which is essentially giving a decisive win to the BJP. This is today's Chanakya. Again, I would say one of the more legacy, or I would say at least in the last 10 years, one of the more recognized agencies. So over to you now. I mean, same question as to Manu, that just make sense of these numbers for us, both the vote shares and the seat shares.
So I mean, I think like both of you, it's easiest to start with vote shares because in some sense we understand the statistics of vote shares much better than we understand the statistics of seat shares always, right? And one thing that is extraordinary is that while the BJP number is jumping around a little bit, actually all of the pollsters have Aam Aadmi Party's vote share in a fairly tight band, right? I'm looking at 41 to 44, if I'm not mistaken, right? And so it's what you said. We're looking at nearly a double digit or perhaps a double digit drop in vote share for the Aam Aadmi Party, right? From one state election to the next. Now, I think one of the things that's very interesting is that from 2013 onward, if you look at BJP's vote share, it had stayed relatively stable actually, right? And
Yes,
so in 2013 it was the single largest party, and then the Aam Aadmi Party started sweeping. Now the story there essentially was that from a very split verdict, the Aam Aadmi Party had eaten up the Congress's vote share, right? That was the story that we were getting.
Yeah.
And the question that
and
we always
not just
had,
Congress, the others also, the BSPs of the world. That's the under notice story, I guess. Because
that's right.
The others was 14%, I think, in 2008, and that crashed along with the Congress almost similarly.
Right. And the Aam Aadmi Party, we'll talk about some point, the ability to latch onto the Purvanchali vote and so on and so forth, were a large part of this story. Now, one of the interesting stories, and we'll have to sort of think about what happened, is that there was one narrative that the BJP was a 40% party, right? 35 to 40% party. What these surveys are showing us is that it is a north of 40% party now in Delhi, at least in state elections, right? And significantly so in many of these cases. So I think that what we are going to have to start grappling with to a greater extent is what explains such a large percentage of people now voting for BJP. Is it who used to vote for Congress and BSP to some extent? Are some Purvanchali voters coming? Is it a middle class base that the Aam Aadmi Party had, built, and a lot of that is starting to be eaten away? The one sort of final comment here that I would make is that, we've all been asked in our various hats, right? What does the arrest of various Aam Aadmi Party leaders and Arvind Kejriwal mean for the election, right? And one story is, look, people don't respond well to this kind of sort of strongman behavior, and we'll get there'll be a backlash. I think one of the things that we have to sort of think through is that while it was a very aggressive tactic, I think the average person in Delhi started speaking about corruption within the Aam Aadmi Party to a greater extent, right? And the middle class voters started to. And for a party that had come up as selling itself as incorruptible, what its sort of abstract quantity was with the middle class voter is something that I think we're going to, have to continue to analyze for the next 3-4 weeks, months. I don't know, but there's something there for sure, because Jharkhand it went the other way in Jharkhand, right? I mean, it did feel like the BJP paid a bit of a price for what had happened with Hemant Soren, but it didn't happen here, right?
But Nilan, can I add something? It's a very interesting point that this seems to have stuck, right, for Aam Aadmi Party. The way I look at it is, being a Delhiwala myself, the way I look at it is that there was a chunk of the middle class that was upset or kind of unhappy with the Aam Aadmi Party in terms of just other reasons, whether it's governance, etc. And then the BJP launched a multi-pronged approach in the sense that it wasn't just corruption, it was the opulence and it was the cynicism associated with normal politics that
That's right.
they started associating with the Aam Aadmi Party. Corruption was one important piece that took away that halo, as Barkha was saying yesterday, from the Aam Aadmi Party, and it gave further impetus to a restless segment of society, which felt that at least in the second term, not a lot of work had been done. This is just strictly the middle class. The lower income groups, I am not so sure, sort of
No,
have
I
been weaned
totally
away to that
agree.
extent. Yeah, exactly. So the other point
No,
I'll
I
make
totally
is,
agree. But you picked
yeah,
the right place. Politics as usual, right?
yeah,
That was the feeling that AAP has now sort of regressed to politics as usual,
ah,
right? That is,
yeah,
in some
yeah.
sense captures.
Yeah, and then the other thing I will add, this is an analytical point, that if these results or these data points hold true, this is not like Karnataka where the polity has turned from tripolar to bipolar. One party has remained static, the other party has eaten some third party's vote share. What has happened here is the Aam Aadmi Party's vote has gone down, BJP's has risen, Congress has also actually gone up. So actually, Delhi is now more tripolar than it was in the last election if these numbers are true, because Congress is now at roughly 7 to 9% from different estimates. So that's another interesting kind of observation. So moving forward, then I remember our common friend Amitabh Tiwari, who's a political strategist and commentator, he wrote an op-ed saying that this Delhi election will come down to three M's: Mahila, Muslim, and middle class. Essentially, the crux of the argument is that the three identities that will shape this election are the gender identity, the class identity, and the religion identity. Because there's, kind of this voter segregation. So I'll take the liberty of now going into each of the identities one by one. And we can probably start with gender. And, Nilan, I'll give you the first word on this, and then Manu, you can chime in. That we've spoken so much about the female voter. I'll give you two sets of contrasting statistics that have come from C Voter and Axis, right? So as per C Voter, whereas the BJP is leading by leaps and bounds amongst the males, the Aam Aadmi Party is showing a similar massive lead of roughly 15, 16 percentage points amongst females. If you then look at Axis is actually showing that, of course, the BJP is ahead amongst males. If you can, yeah. But it's also ahead of the Aam Aadmi Party amongst females. So there is this complete contradiction, A. And B, Delhi is a state where males are higher in number than females. And then you have the turnout question. So make sense of this for us, Nilanjan, that this is one pain point in this larger survey analysis that might still surprise us on Saturday, that capturing the female voter, especially the low income groups, females amongst the low income, that might be the trickiest part of this all?
Yeah, so I think, having looked at other people who are surveying in Delhi at these times, one of the things that stands out is that there are significant non-response rates, right? There are a lot of people in Delhi who are, it's a close election. It's been a contested election.
Yes.
One of the things that happens when income levels rise, as Manu spoke about, is that actually people also become a little more conservative. We know what the kinds of response rates look like in the West, for instance, right? So I think that can of course spring a surprise. What I would say is, leaving aside the point estimates, right? So I mean, obviously, C Voter has things tilting very heavily towards the Aam Aadmi Party for females, and Axis has it almost neck and neck. I mean, the story is essentially the same, right? Because in both of them, you are seeing very significant differences in the gap between female voters and male voters, and I think that is consistent with what a lot of us would have imagined. What is going to eventually happen in terms of to what extent the female voters swing towards the Aam Aadmi Party or not is a difficult thing to capture, and quite honestly, we have no way of making neither of these statements are falsifiable, because we will, even in the final election results, not know how women voted versus how men voted, right? But it is true, and I think it's an important thing for people to think through, which is that if there's going to be a bias here, it's going to be right? That swings it for Aam Aadmi Party. It's something that, let's say,
Correct.
every survey
Yeah.
missed. It's going to be that women from lower class backgrounds were somehow undersampled or non or engaging in non-response at a higher rate. That actually sort of swung the polls, in a
Or
way that
just
none of these.
just gave wrong answers for various reasons. We all know what those reasons are.
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
And so if there's something that can prove all of these exit polls wrong, it is that, right? It is a
Yeah.
bias with a very particular population, and it's very, plausible that such a bias
Yeah.
would occur. So I think obviously the gut feeling is similar to the exit polls, but if the exit polls go off, we have a place to look.
Yeah, Manu. So this is huge, right? In the sense that forget about the male population. In the sense the gap seems to be consistent for both the agencies. Amongst the females, Access is showing a 2 percentage point lead for the BJP, but C-Vote is showing 15 percentage point lead for the Aam Aadmi. That's huge, right? And as Nilanjan is saying, this can have repercussions. Now we've seen elections like Bihar 2020, Bengal 2021. Nobody saw it coming because the female voter went one way, right? Or nobody saw. When I say nobody, when I say I mean like major observers of elections did not see it coming because the female voter of a certain caste went in a certain direction. So, what are your thoughts? I mean, could this be the rabbit in the hat that might surprise us on Saturday? And I'm not saying that these are wrong. I'm just, as an analyst or as a statistician, economist, whatever you may want to call it, we're just trying to mull over possibilities that might happen on Saturday, so that we given a 360-degree perspective to the viewers.
See, there are two things here which are striking. The first one is uh, that two major agencies are basically differing by a huge margin for a particular section of voter that is highly contested. Now, it may be another thing to say, okay, you know what, like, there wasn't a specific focus on this particular demographic, and hence, it wasn't really in the debate, so we don't know. But what's currently happening is that both of the parties actually made a very concerted push to win over women voters through their respective schemes. And in that, what I would call a very high uh, signal to noise ratio, in that atmosphere, it's very hard currently to say that, which one of them gets it right. But my hunch is that there could be some last minute swing or last minute move, which may go undiscovered in the favor of the winner. Now, who the winner would be, I mean, obviously, as of now, if you take
Yeah,
an aggregate, it looks like Aam Aadmi Party. So in this case, it would be instructive to maybe go and have a look at the macro view first, have a bird's eye view, and then try and rappel down the chain, because somewhere I guess some signal is definitely off for the Aam Aadmi Party. It's
mm.
not looking like a very rosy picture. The question remains is that how hard the landing would be.
Yeah,
Will it
exactly.
be,
Soft
will
landing or
it
hard landing. Yeah,
Yeah, so
exactly. Yeah.
we are looking at a slightly high rate of descent. But the question is whether it would crash or it would just maybe cause some extra
Yeah.
shocks. So that's where the thing is, that both of them have very keenly contested for the female voter. They've gone
Yeah.
all out in terms of promising whatever they could. Uh, so one, who is more credible amongst the two? Again, very hard contest, because Modi at some level is liked by the female demographics nationally. So there would be
Yeah.
some, impact of that. And on the other hand, Kejriwal has also, a proven track record. So
Yeah.
so there could be some surprises here. But
Yeah.
again, I mean, it's a very hard call as of now, because it's a
Yeah.
very keenly contested demographic.
But let's also give credit to the fact that if the access numbers are true, that means the BJP registered a massive swing amongst female voters. I mean, no doubt about it.
Indeed.
So I think that is something that one will have to acknowledge and study as to why that happened, how that happened. Okay, so moving from the gender to the religion dimension, and I think this was interesting, not because of the BJP versus the Aam Aadmi Party contest, I would say, but more so because of the Aam Aadmi Party versus the Congress axis here. because we expected some of the minority vote to kind of get split. So we have the C-voter graphic here. So Nilanjan, I want you to focus on the Muslim sort of category or the Sikhs, which is essentially the non-Hindu category, right? So what are we seeing here? We are seeing the Congress picking up almost 19% of the Muslim vote. That's not trivial. Aam Aadmi Party 63% and BJP 13%. Among Sikhs, Aam Aadmi Party leading, Congress a non-player. But amongst all the religious groups, the highest fractionalization that you see is amongst the Muslims. Do you see this as one of the reasons why these exit polls are showing what they're showing? Because Muslims make up for 13% of Delhi's population as of 2011. And if 20% of that, let's assume the proportion in the electorate is also the same. If 20% of that goes in one direction, that's essentially 2.6 or 2.5 percentage points against the Aam Aadmi Party.
No, I think and it has an outsized effect. I would go a step further. So we know
Achha.
that in the last municipal election, we know that
Correct.
there was vote splitting in the Muslim
Yes.
community, where a lot of Muslims were unhappy with how Aam Aadmi Party had, sort of governed, particularly around the riots, and had sort of, decided to swing towards the Congress Party. What happens is that, yes, it is true that it is only, 10, 11, 12, 13% of the population that's voting that is Muslim. First, there are pockets of concentration which are Muslim. So they do, so obviously there are certain seats that are swung by the Muslim vote. The second thing that happens, though, is that when you lose, certain key seats in that way, once the votes start splitting, it has knock-on effects, right? So the way that we think about pivotal groups isn't about their aggregate size. It is their ability to be the
The
vote that
swing
sort of
factor.
yeah,
The
exactly,
swing
that
factor.
inches you above the key point.
Yeah.
And if you are starting to get enough splitting among the Muslim community in enough seats, that can do a lot to dim the level of excitement or interest for the Aam Aadmi Party. I mean that.
So
So I do think, yes, it's only 2 point. It's 10 to 12% of 13% of the electorate, but it has an outsized influence in the seats that Aam Aadmi Party can win.
And Neelan, just to add, this is also further corroborated by Axis's numbers if on your screen, where Congress is picking up 15% of the Muslim vote. Here, the BJP is getting less because in C voter it's 13, here it's 5, and Aam Aadmi Party is 74, primarily because the BJP's numbers are not that high. But Congress is still picking up 15 to 20% of the vote. Yeah, so that's very interesting. The other demographic, and Manu, you should chime in at this point. The other demographic that stands out for me is the Dalit vote, less so than the Muslims. It seems that the Congress is picking up. If you go to the C voter slide, it's roughly so. In this slide, it's what? Yeah. The C voter slide is 7% of the Dalit vote. This is the second biggest vote share of the Congress among social groups. And again, Dalits are north of 15% of Delhi's electorate. And if you go to the Axis poll, then amongst the Valmikis, Congress doing 10%, and Jatav 7%, and other SCs, that's my sense, is 8%. So that's essentially higher than all other groups than Muslims. So my point is, let's go back to the guest, please. My point is the Congress, the social groups which are the most favorable towards the Congress, it seems, are Muslims, which Nilan just spoke about. And at the second position is Dalits. And this is the Dalit Muslim combination that the Congress was able to consolidate in the Lok Sabha election to some extent in Haryana. And they were banking on this in other states also. But have these two groups, has the movement of these two groups, do you think, if these numbers are true, been pivotal in at least shaving off some of the votes of the Aam Aadmi Party? Because otherwise, their preferred party would have been the Aam Aadmi Party. What's your take?
Historically, especially let's say if we consider the polity post Rajiv Gandhi, uh, even during their worst times, and I'm talking pre 2014 era, um, Congress always found some traction within the Dalit voters and obviously the Muslim voters. Now, what we've witnessed after 2014 is that with their ability to, especially to be with their inability to be in the contest, for the national power, these voters drifted away to local or regional alternatives wherever they could. And within Delhi also, we saw the emergence of Aam Aadmi Party. And the result was that overnight, we saw Congress's vote bank vaporize. In fact, I remember prior to somewhere around 2013 and 14, one of the big spokespersons of BJP, who was with Congress back then, we were discussing, and they said, I can tell you 6 seats, which we will never lose. And I said, why? He said, because of the demographics. I said, well, that makes sense, but data seems to be adverse. Uh, and when the results were out, that was the case. The vote base had overnight vaporized and shifted lock, stock, and barrel to Aam Aadmi Party. What we are perhaps witnessing now is some sort of division, or some sort of, let us say, uh, introspection about the one-way support that was given to Kejriwal. Maybe people want to reevaluate their political choices here. And some credit is also due to Rahul Gandhi for his I would say rather vigorous focus on particular themes about proportional representation, about how he will stand for the minorities. So in that way, it's a two-way game, that uh, Kejriwal cannot indulge in that sort of rhetoric beyond a point without losing additional voters from the middle class.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
Rahul Gandhi, he has basically lesser to be afraid of. So he can go
yeah.
all out, and he went
Correct.
all out.
That's the kind
And
of risk
and
that the
and
Congress has taken by not. They fiddled with soft Hindutva for some time, but they've gone back now, and I think they're now
yes,
firmly. They have this conviction that they don't want to have that associated with them, and I think if they kind of complement that with other social bases, that might just work for them, and it has worked for them in some cases. So I mean, credit where it's due. Okay, so before we wrap up, the last chunk is the income group classification, and I'll just ask the team to pull up by profession, by income group, whatever data points we have. And here again, it is conventional wisdom is that as you move up the income hierarchy, support for the Aam Aadmi Party will dwindle and support for the BJP will pick up. Right. So if we can have the income numbers first, that will be great. But even this is a good proxy, right? So yeah, okay, this is good, right? So this is by profession, I would say. And if we can zoom in, you'll find that, yeah, so you'll find that amongst the unemployed slash students, BJP is leading. This is C voter. Housewives, the female effect, this is C voter again. Aam Aadmi Party leading. General labor, Aam Aadmi Party leading. The moment you come to private sector service, government service, and business self-employed, you'll see that the BJP starts leading. So higher up in the income group, BJP starts leading. This is C voter. Go to Axis, and we'll find something similar. Amongst the unemployed, it's tight. Students, it's tight. Labor, Aam Aadmi Party slightly ahead, but still tight. Skilled professionals, BJP ahead. Small shop, BJP ahead. Housewives, Aam Aadmi Party slightly ahead. Private service, BJP way ahead. Government service, BJP way ahead. Others, also BJP way ahead. So, given these numbers, it seems that even within these two, so I'm very interested, for example, look at general labor, right? C voters saying Aam Aadmi Party 52, BJP 31, and go to Axis. In Axis, if we see labor, Aam Aadmi Party 47, BJP 42. So go back to the guests now. What that is telling me is that even these two polls have not been able to reconcile as to how much dent the BJP has been able to make in the lower class groups. And is that potentially another source of surprise that might come about on Saturday? Because on a lot of the other metrics, they are aligned, right? So students and unemployed, both polls seem to be aligned. Gender, we know they're not aligned. So of course, housewives, they won't be aligned. But general labor, that's one. The other question that I want to sort of bring up is a lot of the identities are actually cross-cutting, right? So I am a
yes,
female laborer, whether I vote as a female or a laborer, we don't know. I am an upper caste male, sorry, I'm saying an upper caste female, whether I vote as an upper caste person or a female, that's also unknown. The salience of identities is something that we don't know. So your comments, Milan, and then Manu, and then we are almost close to wrapping up the show.
So again, I mean, I think we started with this discussion that there are clearly a lot of class distinctions in voter preferences. We know that lower middle class and poor voters have traditionally leaned towards the Aam Aadmi Party to a greater extent. They may still do so, but how much the advantage is, we don't know. We see that those who are, owning shops, those who are in private business, those who are middle and upper middle class and upper class, have tended to push towards the BJP. I mean, I think just a couple of things that I would say in thinking about these data points. First, let's not underestimate the fact that if the last two elections, the Aam Aadmi Party has got.
Neelan, this is also new data points. Just comment on this as well, because now we have the income categorization. So feel free to comment on this as well. Yeah, please.
Okay,
Thank you.
so yeah, so here this comes across very clearly. I think when you look at the income categorization, you can see the sort of the shift, right? Where poorer classes are either the very poorest classes, of course, leaning towards the Aam Aadmi Party, but you do see that under 10,000, under 20,000 rupees, the Aam Aadmi Party has a significant lead, and the moment you sort of jump above that threshold, the popularity completely flips, right? And the BJP becomes more popular among the wealthier populations. And what I would say is there's one cross-cutting cleavage that we don't give enough sort of thinking about. Delhi is also unusual in its percentage of upper caste and general caste voters. So it's one of these sort of funny things that people often forget. But there was an earlier slide which said a big lead among Rajputs and Brahmins. And you might think, oh, who cares? That's always what it is. But in the case of Delhi, it's 50 to 20% of the voters, right? It's a huge number actually. So what happens is that when we think about this cross-cuttingness, right? So if you think that a lot of these upper caste voters are also likely the ones who are more wealthy, and also the ability of the Aam Aadmi Party to cobble away some of these voters in every election is what allowed them to jump over 50% in a state election. And one way to think about this is that maybe Aam Aadmi Party hasn't changed some of its core appeal with the lower middle class, but its inability to sort of cobble pieces from these other places where in various ways the BJP was already strong. But its inability to pull a few more of those voters away is actually what's dropping it these sort of 10 percentage points. So I do very much think that thinking across gender and especially thinking across caste and income is going to explain a lot of the story when we see the final results.
True. Manu, you want to add, because you've seen two interesting sets of data points, one on the basis of profession, the other on the basis of income levels, and they kind of also highly correlated with each other. But the other point that this cross-cuttingness of identities and what that means when you analyze an election as an academician.
You see, here's the thing that covering so many elections over the years, one thing has stuck me, that identification, I mean, I might run into the entire DEI brigade, but it's quite fluid between if you identify more with the class of the society that you belong to, that is socioeconomic one, or the community. Now, at lower PCI levels, per capita income levels, we see that affiliation is higher towards the community or gender or wherever you are placed. But as you rise up the ladder, you increasingly become class conscious. And these huge malls in Delhi, I mean, they're a testament to I guess where the economic and social center of gravity is shifting. So with a per capita income of higher than $5,000, again, I would repeat, I mean, they are solidly marching into a territory whereby increasingly we will see the community lines being blurred and the class lines becoming more prominent. And if you see it from that prism, a lot of things start making sense with this particular election. Now, I mean, as of now, we don't have the real results, but directionally speaking, at least, that's the case. The other point I would quickly make is that, when Aam Aadmi Party won the elections, or it sort of came into prominence, it promised, an incorruptible governance. And the unsaid thing in that was that India was bleeding or India was losing out because of corruption. And that was the reason why we didn't have those shiny skyscrapers like East Asia. And if we were to remove corruption out of the political matrix, then we would have a glistening city. But guess what? it's become a bugbear that the city doesn't even look like the city that we saw in the movies like I think Delhi 6, Lucky OA, and all those. That era seemed different.
Those
And
were the UPA year movies is what you're referring to.
yes, Khosla Ka Ghosla and all, good movies.
Yeah. Right. So it's interesting point, no? And let's wrap it up with this. I guess I don't think that corruption in India works in a vacuum, honestly, as an election issue. It's only when you can couple it with something that's related to your daily bread and butter that people start doubting the politicians' intentions. I think in India, the electorate is very forgiving. If you're near the staff and they have to suffer, they'll go with you, which is what we saw after demonetization, which is what we have seen, even when things have not been economically very sound under the leadership of Prime Minister Modi. But it's when you can actually dent the leader's credibility. That is when the voter can starts making a connection that niyat kharab hai, isliye we are where we are. And I think that's what Manu really nicely pointed out, that at that point, the UPA was in a situation where economic hardships, high inflation, high fiscal deficit was coupled with this perception of corruption. The Aam Aadmi Party and the BJP at the same time come in with these incorruptible images and the promise that, let us come in and we'll change the shape of we'll change the image of this whole thing. The BJP and Prime Minister Modi so far, through whatever means, I mean, we can be cynical about it, has been able to maintain that still. And it is because of that despite not delivering as well as one would have thought economically, he still remains in power. That sheen, that novelty that was associated with the incorruptible image of the Aam Aadmi Party seems to have gone down, which when coupled with misgovernance and economic stagnation, not just in Delhi, I would say, but a general sort of sense of economic stagnation, seems to have delivered it seems, as per these numbers, seems to have made the voters restless and yearn for change. And in the absence of other alternatives, they found the BJP to be the best possible alternative. So that's what these numbers kind of mean to me. And I guess Manu and Nilan also agreeing with this. But thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us. And we hope the audiences have enjoyed. Barkha will be back. My hope is she'll be back again tomorrow. But we really hope you enjoyed this presentation. And we'll also be back on the 9th for the day-long coverage of the counting day. So thank you so much and have a very good night.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
It's great to see you here. Thank you for watching our work. If you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to click the bell icon and subscribe to Mojo Story and support independent, robust journalism.